Hey guys, welcome to another Logic Pro X tips and tricks video. Yesterday we did a sweep high and low cut filter, and somebody said, oh, it'd be nice if we could see that being done with a bandpass filter, and I agree. So let's create a sweepable bandpass filter. For beginners, I'll explain what a bandpass is as we go, right? A bandpass filter gives a different sound to a sweep low or high cut. It's a really nice sound. Now, when we created our sweep high and low cut, we did it by copying a sweep high and low cut that was already set up on the output for an electronic drummer track, right? But with the bandpass, we've got to create it from scratch. So let's build one. So we've got a mix here. I'll just use some Apple loops, and this is all your music, right? And it's set up as you would normally have it by default, right? The output of everything in my mix is going to the final stereo out. All right, we select all the channels for all the tracks. Look, they're all going to the final stereo out, so everything in the mix arrives at the final stereo out here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of our channels for every track in our mix, and with them all selected, we assign them to the first available free group bus, which is the first bus in the list that doesn't have a name and an arrow. So my next available free bus is bus 8, so I assign the output of everything to bus 8, and I'm doing that by selecting every channel for everything in the mix, and with them all selected, if I change the output of one of them, it'll change the output of all of them. So we send them all to the next available bus, which for me is bus 8. Bam! An auxiliary return is created down here, and everything in my mix is now feeding to this stereo group bus. And then the signal passes through this group bus and off to the final output on your speakers and headphones, right? So the whole mix is passing through this stereo group bus on its way to the final out. Okay. Now, to get smart controls, smart controls will only appear for a selected track in the track area. They won't appear for a selected channel in the mixer. So this group bus has to have its own track. We want this stereo group bus to live at the end of the mixer where it already is. The order of everything in the mixer is determined by the order of everything in the track area. So for this group bus to stay living at the end of the mixer here, when I create a track for it, that track has to be at the bottom of this list of tracks, because whatever order the tracks are here, that's the order of the channels in the mixer. So I select the very last track in my music, then I go to the group bus and create a track for it, and it will create that track after the highlighted track here. So it'll create the track for the group bus at the end of this track list, and the order of the track list determines the order of the channels in the mixer for those tracks. So because this is the last track, this group bus track, the group bus, the channel for the group bus stays at the end of the mixer. Okay, so now we've made a track for this group bus. The entire mix passes through this group bus and its track. Right? Okay. And now we can set our bandpass EQ up on this group bus, and we can bandpass sweep our entire mix through this group bus. So we open an EQ on the group bus channel. Okay, now we turn off all the bands of the EQ. We're going to use the low cut and the high cut. Okay, now the low cut, whatever frequency you choose, everything below it cuts. It's also called a high pass because whatever frequency you select, everything above that frequency passes through. So this is a low cut or high pass. And the high cut is called a high cut because whatever frequency you choose, everything higher than that is cut. But it's also called a low pass because whatever frequency you select, everything lower than that frequency is allowed to pass through. So what we do is we bring the two together, and then we're creating a bandpass. And a bandpass is a filter where a band of frequencies around the centre frequency is allowed to pass through. Everything lower and higher than that band is rejected. So hence it's called a band pass, because a band of frequencies around an area, a centre frequency area, is allowed to pass through. Hence it's a band pass. Now we can make this band pass as steep as we like, or we can make it more mellow, more gentle. The slope, the roll off each side can be much more gentle, like that, meaning the frequencies working down and up from that centre frequency will be dropped off, not quite so drastically. Okay, but I'm going to start it at 48 dB an octave, as steep as it goes. And then we just bring the low and the high together, like that. And that is the width of our bandpass. Now you can make it as tight or as wide as you like. I'm going to go with something like that. The tighter it goes, when you start to get it really tight and peaky, you get to a certain point and it's not making it really any peakier. It's just, as you bring them more and more together, it just reduces the overall output of that bandpass area. So this is kind of like as peaky as you want it, but you can make it a bit wider if you like. So let's make it like that. Okay, and there's our bandpass. Now what we need to do is sweep the high and the low cut at the same time, so they both sweep up and down, maintaining their relative distance from each other, therefore sweeping this bandpass gap up and down the frequencies. Let's do that. So we've got the EQ on the track, bring in the smart controls. But as we know from the previous tutorial where we did the high and low cut sweep, for some reason Apple have decided in the programming that Logic will not create smart controls automatically for an EQ plugin on a channel. Okay, smart controls will only be created automatically for any other type of insert effect. So we need to insert some other plugin after the EQ so that a smart control panel is automatically created, which we can then edit to control our bandpass sweep. So under the EQ, I'm going to put a sample delay. I like to use the sample delay because it's only got 3 controls. Bam. Okay, there's a sample delay now under the EQ, and a smart control panel is created automatically to control that sample delay. And there are 3 smart controls because there's only 3 parameters on this sample delay. The left delay amount, the right delay amount, and that is the link switch that switches the link on so they're both linked. All right, okay. So let's go into edit. First of all, we don't need this second pot because one pot needs to control the high and the low cut at the same time. So when we sweep it, it sweeps them both up and down. So we get this pot and we delete its mapping. It's not being used. Okay, now the switch. Let's go to the switch, select the switch. It's currently assigned to the sample delay link left and right. So we delete that. And now this switch is still selected in blue, but it's unmapped. Now if you look on that unmapped row, there's a little pair of arrows pointing up and down. Click that and it brings you a list up of every parameter of everything on the channel. So we go to main, insert 1, which is the channel EQ, bypass, and assign that. So this switch now controls the bypass for the EQ. Off, on, but it's back to front. When the switch is in the up position with the LED lit, the EQ's off, and when it's in the down position with the LED off, the EQ's on. It's back to front. So all we do is we tick the invert here. That inverts that now, so it's now the right way round. EQ off, EQ on. Okay, now we get the left delay control pot here. I mean, it's currently mapped to the left delay of the sample delay. Select its mapping and delete it. Now it's unmapped and it resets itself to full counterclockwise travel, so it's all the way turned down. There's the unmapped slot for this unmapped smart control. We go to the pair of arrows, drop the list down and choose the channel EQ, and I'm going to start with the low cut frequency. Do that first, low cut frequency. That's the frequency for the low cut. So we assign this pot to the low cut frequency of the EQ. Now that pot jumps, leave it alone, don't adjust it. Go back here and add a second mapping slot, add mapping. Now there's a second mapping slot. Drop the list down for that mapping slot and choose the channel EQ high cut frequency, the high cut frequency here, right? Bam. So now this control pot is controlling the low cut and the high cut frequency. And now it moves them both at the same time, sweeping our bandpass up and down. Right? Wunderbar. Now, because we brought the low and high cut close together like that, you can widen it out or whatever you like, because we brought them both together like that, it's sort of turning everything down here and everything down here, but the level being let through there is at 0. I mean, here, look at 0. So if we want, we can just raise the overall EQ level up a bit. And now we've got this this bandpass which we can sweep up and down, because we're sweeping the low and the high cut at the same time. They move up and down relative to each other, maintaining the gap between themselves, which creates that bandpass sweeping up and down. And everything in our mix is passing through that group bus and through this bandpass. Now it's very tight at the moment, so it's not particularly musical, because frequencies below and above the bandpass are being drastically cut. The roll off here, the slope, the steepness of that cue is very steep. So frequencies below and above are being cut drastically. It's not particularly musical. You might want it that tight, but it probably sound a bit more pleasant if you make it a bit wider, a bit more musical, right? And you can adjust this any time. Once we're going to save it in a minute and load it up, but once you've loaded it, you can adjust it to be as tight or as wide as you like. So the 24 dB an octave is going to be a bit more musical, a bit more smoother, and you can adjust this amount that you want for the output. Yeah, so there you go. A sweeping bandpass filter, and it sounds lovely. Okay, so we've created it. So with that track, the group bus track selected, we can now save in the library that preset, which can then be loaded anytime onto a group bus, right? So library, these are all channel strip presets for group buses only, right? So I select the track for the group bus. We've created the sweep bandpass on it. Oh, and by the way, just to show you, we can retitle this control. Actually, let's retitle it as bandpass frequency. All right, and then get rid of the sample delay. We don't need it anymore. Okay, all done. We're ready to save. Track for the group bus selected. Save. I've already done this once. I'm going to call it sweep bandpass bus. Bam, saved. Just replace it. I already saved it once. You can call it anything you want, but now it lives in, whenever you've got a group bus track, it's available to load onto a group bus as a channel strip preset for group buses. Okay, and that's that. All done. Now we can sweep our group bus with all our music passing through it. Anytime we want. And you can set up your automation so that drop out happens exactly where you want it, and the sweep is as precise as you want it, etc. Yeah. Okay. Now we've created it on a group bus. Back to the mixer. But a sweep bandpass can also sound fantastic on an individual instrument. So, for example, here I've got a synth loop on a track. It's on an audio track. Oh, wait a minute, it's still feeding into the group bus with the bandpass on. Let's turn that off. No more bandpass on the group bus. So everything in the mix is feeding into this group bus, but I've turned the bandpass off. Right, so this individual audio track and its channel, right, this has got a loop, a synth loop. So if you want to bandpass an individual audio track, which can sound great, we can just copy the preset from here over to here, because this is handling audio and this audio channel and its track is handling audio. So we just go to our group bus, which has got the sweep bandpass on it, copy that channel strip setting, go to this individual audio track in its channel, paste it in, and now we've got that sweep bandpass on this individual audio track. So I can just sweep this individual track, switch it on. Etc. Right? Okay. Now we've copied and pasted that bus preset onto this audio track. We can save it as an audio channel strip preset, so we can load a bandpass straight onto an audio track from the library anytime we want. Got it selected there. Our library, save. Now we're saving this channel strip preset for a track, because these are all audio track channel strip presets, right? So I've already done it once. I call it sweep bandpass track, or whatever I want. Save. And now, anytime, let me go back here and undo. Right. So now we're back. This audio track and its channel it's got no effects on it, nothing. I just select it. It's an audio track. I select it, go to the library, user patches, and there it is. Sweep bandpass track, and I just load it up, and hey presto, I've instantly loaded my sweep bandpass onto this audio track ready to use. Okay, but it sounds great. A bandpass sweep sounds great on an individual instrument. And in that case, we could easily copy the created bandpass that we did from the bus to an audio track, because they're both handling audio. Right, but what about if we want to bandpass sweep an individual instrument? Well, then it's a bit different, because an individual instrument channel, track and channel, has the instrument on it, followed by a bunch of effects. There might be some sends that also contribute to the overall sound of that synth. Yeah, I can tell you now, if we copy that channel strip preset from this audio track, we've got the sweep bandpass on this audio track in its channel here, right? I copy it and go to paste it onto this instrument track in its channel. Paste channel strip setting, or even if I do paste plugins only, the result's the same. If you paste the channel strip preset from an audio or bus onto an instrument track, or what happens is it leaves the instrument slot alone, so the instrument's still there, but it replaces all the effects. So if I now paste that in, it leaves the synth but pastes in just that sweep EQ, that bandpass we created. You can see it there, but the problem is there's a bug. When you go to the smart controls, they don't work. The smart controls are by default assigned to the synth, but not to any parameter of the synth. Nothing works. The switch and the pot doesn't work. So we can't do it that way. All right? Do. Undo. Okay, it's back where we were. So if you want to bandpass sweep an individual instrument channel, and most of the software synths that you get nowadays, the filter section allows you to put a bandpass in, but it's still really cool to be able to bandpass sweep the entire output of an instrument channel, right? And it might not be a synth, that particular instrument, you know, or it might not have the ability to have a bandpass filter built in. So let's say we want to bandpass sweep an individual instrument. The best way to do it is this. Let me set everything back to a typical setup. I'm going to get rid of the track for the group bus, and I'm going to get rid of the actual group bus. Oh, select it, backspace, delete. Okay, and I'm going to put everything in my mix back so it's all routed to the final stereo out. This is how you would have it by default. everything in your mix is routed to the final stereo out here. Right? Okay. But we want to filter sweep this one synth, this one instrument. It doesn't have to be a synth, it could be any kind of instrument. But we want to filter sweep that with our bandpass. Now we know we can't copy and paste that bandpass sweep in because it won't work. So the best way to, or the only practical way to bandpass sweep an individual instrument is to feed it to its own group bus and then put the bandpass over that group bus so that you're then feeding that one instrument output to its own bus and sweeping the bandpass on the bus on that group bus as that instrument signal passes through its bus. So what we do is I get this one instrument that I want to bandpass individually. I assign its output to the first available bus. That bus is created down here. Now, I'll have to create a track for that bus in order to get access to the smart controls. But here's the thing, again, remember the order of the channels in the mixer is taken from the order of the tracks in the track column here. Normally, when I'm creating a group bus to feed my entire mix through, I want that group bus to stay at the end of the mixer here next to the output, right? But in this case, we're sending just this individual track and its channel to its own group bus. So I want that group bus to live next to the channel here for that instrument. So the group bus is here created. This output channel for this track is feeding to this group bus, right? Just that instrument is going to this group bus. And then from there to the final output along with everything else, right? So when I create a track for this group bus, which we must have to access the smart controls, I want the track for the group bus to live directly under this synth track so that it's right next door to it, right? So instead of selecting the last track in my list and then creating the track, which will put my group bus at the end here, I select the actual instrument that's feeding into the bus, then go to the bus in the mixer and create a track for it. And that will cause the track for this bus to be created under the synth track. And because the order of the channels here is determined by the order in the track column here, as soon as I create that track for this bus under this synth track, this bus will jump up and live next to the synth track that's feeding it, right? Because whatever track I've got selected here, when I create a track for this group bus, it will be created underneath. So I create track, it creates the group bus track under that synth track that's feeding it, and because the order here determines the order here, that group bus jumps up to live next to the synth track that's feeding it. So this synth now feeds into this group bus, and then that goes off to the final output along with the rest of the mix. So now this individual synth is feeding into this group bus, and that's the track for it there. So now all I do is I go with the group bus which this synth is feeding into, I select that group bus, go to my user patches, load up my sweep bandpass bus, and now I can sweep the output of this synth feeding into this bus. Yeah, this synth instrument track is feeding into this group bus track and its channel, and the bandpass EQ is on it. That's the only practical way to bandpass sweep an individual instrument. Send that instrument output to its own group bus, put the sweep bandpass onto that group bus, and then you are only bandpassing that individual instrument whose output is being fed to its own dedicated bus. From there, the signal passes to the final output along with everything else. All right. Now, obviously, with everything else playing, you won't hear that bandpass, but in a breakdown section, for example, all these get muted. So just the drums and this instrument are playing. And and then you have to do some automation to drop all these channels back in, or send them to their own group bus and drop that bus back in, etc. Right? So that's the only practical way to do a bandpass sweep on an individual instrument output. Send it to its own bus and put the bandpass sweep on the bus. Right? So there you go. Bandpass sweep filter. It's got a very different sound to a high and low cut sweep, obviously, right? Because you know, with a high cut, a low cut sweep, we sweep up and down, but wherever the frequency is, everything above that we hear, everything all the way to the top. And with a high cut, we can sweep the frequency, but whatever frequency we've selected, we hear everything from there all the way down. So we hear all that as we sweep. Or the other way, we hear all this as we sweep. But with a bandpass, we're restricting. Everything below and above is cut, so we just hear that narrow band of frequencies. It's a completely different sound. It's a completely different sound to a sweep, low cut or high cut. And bear in mind, you can sweep any instrument. It doesn't have to be a synth. You could sweep any of the sampled instruments like guitars or basses or anything you want. And we've already saved a preset for audio tracks, so we can load a bandpass onto an audio track anytime, and we can load it onto a bus anytime. Yeah. There you go. Sweep bandpass filter. I hope that's useful.